Hi, and welcome to Safe in the Real World. I'm Ahmed Said, and today we're going to be talking about remote PI planning agenda and how can we set up an effective agenda for a remote PI planning. Now, what do I mean by remote PI planning? Now, if you recall, a PI planning is that 2-day event where we have up to 150 people that are descending on this single location, and they've got that powerful face-to-face communication going on. But now, as you know, we've got the coronavirus that's happened, and I've got a lot of requests that have come in over the last week or so where people have said, Ahmed, can you help us to set up a remote PI planning event where people don't actually come and to a location for face-to-face communication, but what they do is they actually dial into and run a PI planning event in that way remotely. So this video is about how do we set up an agenda to support such a remote planning event. Now, when you think about PI planning, obviously we've got the standard approach and agenda that's come from SAFE. I'll be talking about that first, and then I'll be talking about my real world experience and give you a real world example of an agenda that I use and I put together, and I'll show you how you can convert a standard agenda to a remote agenda, and we'll be going through that together now in this video. Okay, so the first thing to look at is that we want to ask ourselves, what are the outcomes and what are the outputs we're trying to get from PI planning? So the first thing, obviously, what we want to do is we want to be really clear on what our goals are for the upcoming program increment. So when we walk out of our PI planning event, we want to be clear on our goals. We want to make sure we have an emergent roadmap, and we also want to make sure we're clear on our risks and impediments. Now, we want to make sure we have our goals and emergent roadmap, risks and impediments, both at the team level, but also at the program level as well. I do not have coronavirus, for the record. And also, coronavirus is not transmutable through a camera, so don't worry, you're okay. All right, so let's have a look at the standard SAFE agenda. So I'll whiz through this really quickly. So on your screen, you can actually see what a standard SAFE agenda is from there, from the scaledagile.com website. So you start off with the business context between 8 to 9. You're going to be talking about the product and solution vision, followed by the architectural vision. Then you talk about how we do the planning, and then you have your lunch. The main team planning happens after lunch between 1 to 4 o'clock, followed by a review of what the teams have come up with, and then finally the management review and problem solve at the end of day one. Day 2 then starts with taking the outputs from the management review, and they talk to any teams that need to make their judgments, make those adjustments, and then the teams break out together, and then you have a final review lunch. Risks, they walk through the program risks, and they what's called roam them. They do a confidence vote. If there's any planning that's needed, that happens, and then at the end you have a retrospective. Okay, so that's a whiz through of what your PI planning agenda actually looks like. Now, if we look at how we would shift that from an on-site to a remote, have a look at the screen. What we see is we say, okay, the first couple of sessions we have, fairly straightforward. We have the business, the context, the vision, the architecture, and the planning. The whole morning really was all effectively in one single room, and I was working on that. And we can have just one or a number of different dial-ins for all of those. But effectively, you've got a single dial-in where everybody's dialing into that session, and that happens until lunchtime. Okay, now when you come out from after lunch, you now have to simulate the fact that the teams are now working in different parts of the room, right? So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have different dial-ups for teams. We're going to need to have different dial-ups for the Scrum of Scrums. If you remember, the Scrum of Scrums is that touch point in the middle of the team planning to make sure that we're on track and we're not falling behind as well. And then also what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have got a separate dial-in for dependency management with a slightly different audience, maybe the Scrum Masters, release train engineers, and other people that we need to actually start to put those dependencies together as well. Now remember, day one, sometimes in practice I find that teams are not able to get that far all the way through the dependencies, and in practice that may take place in day 2, but that's something just to bear in mind as well, that you may need to have something over there for day 1. And then you have a draft plan review between 3 and 5 o'clock. Again, a single dial-in or separate options, because what you may have is if you've got multiple value streams in the same train, then you might want to have separate dial-ins for a different value stream, as an example. Okay. And then finally, you've got management review and problem solving, and then you'd have a management dial-in for that as well. Okay, let's move on to day 2. And what we see over here, we've got 8 to 9 o'clock planning adjustments. Again, my feedback is it's quite early, right? And sometimes people need to get in from lots of different places, but this is the standard SAFe guidelines. I will give you in just a few minutes what I use in terms of the real world PI planning agenda as well. Okay, so if you look at this, you've got planning adjustments happening at 8 o'clock in the morning. You've got a single dial-in happening over there. Then you've got team breakouts between 9 and 11 o'clock. Again, similar to what we had last time, you're going to have separate dial-ins for the teams, separate dial-ins for the Scrum of Scrums, and also for dependency management as well. Then we'll have, when we have a final plan review, we'll have a single dial-in where everybody dials in, presents their plan, and then people can then review and comment on that. Walk through again the program risk. You might not need everyone here, right? You might need just a subset of all of the people. Dial in for the program risk, or again, you might have all of them over there, right? Depending upon how you view your views on that. Finally, we have a PI confidence vote between 2 and say, I don't know, probably shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Then you can have a single dial-in session for that, but you'd probably want to have some voting software with that, right, to support that effort there. If there is any planned rework, then you've got some space over there in the standard agenda. In practice, what I find is that if you've got planned rework, by that time, mostly people are completely wiped out, and what ends up happening is that they actually pick up the planned rework in the following day as well. Okay, but anyway, depending upon your situation and how soon you find, and the nature and size and scale of the planned rework, if it's very big, you might need to carve out some time for that on that day, the afternoon, or even going into the following day if it's a large amount of rework. And then finally, you've got a retrospective over there. Okay, so that's the standard SAFe agenda. Okay, here you've got a real world example that I've taken from an actual PI planning that I was running a few years ago. It's a similar type of structure that I still like to use. As a general principle, what you see is I try to keep tighter time boxes for the planning and split it out so they've got clear objectives that need to be met in each of the different sessions as well, which I find can be quite useful as well. And also what you will see over here is that, you know, the timings are slightly later. There's a socializing element in there, which I think is really important when we start off with between 8:30 to 9 o'clock. And again, we have similar to what we had in the previous agenda from SAFe. We've got the on-site and we've got the remote sections over there that show you how you can actually design these for a remote session. Pretty much the same kind of principles. I won't walk you through each one. I'll leave you to have a look through that table and work out for yourself. And again, day 2 starts off with a little bit of socializing over there, and then what you have is you've got different breakout sessions as is required. Wasn't quite sure on how you can socialize online in terms of to replicate the on-site thing, but maybe there's some ideas you guys may have. If you do, please put them in the comments below, and we can be good to get some ideas in terms of how you could replicate, the on-site coffee kind of socializing scene online. If you've got any ideas or tips on that, I'll be really glad to hear that. Okay, so there you have it. That is a remote agenda. That is the kind of stuff that I think you need to go and you need to have a look and set up so that you've got an effective PI planning where everybody is dialing in, as opposed to PI planning where everybody comes into a single venue. So I hope you find that useful. If you've got any questions around remote PI planning, please reach out to me directly. You can come to my site as well at www.sprintzero.com. Good luck with your SAFe PI planning. Stay safe and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye.